Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you,
Anand.
Anand.
Yeah, good evening. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, one and all. I am Achal Sethi, Student Councillor, Indian School, Darset. It is my pleasure and huge honor to welcome each and every one of you in this event to commemorate World Mental Health Day. To start with, I would like to invite Dr. Neeta Joseph, HOD Inclusive Education, Indian School, Darset, for a welcome address. Over to you, ma'am. I am Achal Sethi, Student Councillor, Indian School, Darset. It is my pleasure.
Thank you, Anshul, ma'am.
To welcome each and every one of you.
Good evening to all. Thank you for joining on time. Today, on the commemoration of World Mental Health Day, I take privilege in welcoming you all to this gathering. It is my privilege to welcome the chief guest for this evening, Mr. Vinod Kumar K, Head Parents Relations and HSC Subcommittee, whose presence will make this event very momentous. Good evening, respected President of the SMC, Mr. Sebastian Chungar, Mrs. Blessy Diana Shijin, Vice President SMC, Head Purchase Committee, Mr. Ajit Vasudevan, Convener SMC and Head Academic and ICT Committee, Dr. Kurian Abraham, Treasurer SMC and Head Finance, Planning and Sports Committee, and all esteemed members of the school committee. It is with great joy that I welcome you all to the commemoration of World Mental Health Day 2021. A special welcome to Mrs. Shama Shamsuddin, Head Inclusive Education Subcommittee and Head Co-Curricular, and Cultural Subcommittee. I welcome our beloved Principal, Mr. Rama Srivastava. He has worked in the forefront in organizing and planning this event. Very thankful to you, sir, and a warm welcome. A hearty welcome to our principals, Mr. Alexander Givargis and Mrs. Geeta Chauhan, supervisors, coordinators, HODs, fellow teachers, and non-teaching staff to this evening when we are going to spend some time to understand the importance of mental health. I now welcome our students and parents who are joining us from their homes today evening. Schools are opening. Besides mental health, I ensure that today's session would help us all, teachers, students, and parents, in shifting from online to offline classes with more confidence. Thank you for joining. To help us observe this day with more meaning, we have amongst us our keynote speaker, Dr. Anand Kumar S., MBBS, MD Psychiatry, working in Apollo Hospital, Muscat. He has a rich experience of 10 years, and when I had connected with him, I found that he's exactly what is expected of a professional psychiatrist. He is dedicated to his field of practice. At the same time, he is kind and informed when he decides what will work best for his patient. He immediately reflected with interest when I requested him, and this readiness to create awareness about mental health completes him as a mental health professional. Welcome, Dr. Anand. With these words, I now invite Mr. Vinod Kumar to address us on this occasion. Please, sir, over to you.
The present time is marked as COVID pandemic time. It is not at all a pleasant time as well, quite a poignant time rather. We all are going through a difficult time. And recently, it happened, it caused a lot of mental troubles for people. Recently, in one of the local newspapers in one of the states in India, that is Kerala, I read a news that around 12% of the people have mental problems. It is quite a worrying fact, and this really because of the COVID pandemic times. So why this happens? Or what causes this mental trouble? And what are the things which will help us to overcome this? And in this page, I would like to look into all these aspects in a brief way. respected parents who attend this meeting, and beloved children who will be watching this event, and the faculty members headed by Mr. Aman Srivastava, and my beloved crew members of the SNC led by Mr. Sebastian Chungat. A hearty welcome to this function. You know, studies say that around 35,000 people committed suicide all around the world after the start of COVID. And it includes a lot of children as well. What could be the reason? And other studies say that most of the COVID deaths, around 25% of the COVID deaths happened because of fear and other related issues. So what could be the reason? And we remember children back 2 years in school, enjoying their time, socializing, interacting with their peers, their teachers and everyone, and enjoying to the full strength. But they were forced to restrict themselves into the four walls of the houses after that. This happened before 18 months, exactly saying before 18 months, and that has created a lot of trouble for the children and all the entire humanity. And this is the main cause of these mental problems, depression, all that, because the people lost the chances of socializing, they lost their interaction with their fellow beings. This happens in schools also. And we know that the children who were happily enjoying the school days were forced to restrict themselves to within four walls after that. So they lost the chance of interacting with their peers, their teachers, all that. And this created a lot of personality deformations in them. And this might be a cause of these deaths, this depression, this dilemma, this dismay and rejection. What could be the possible solutions for that? And what could be the possible things to overcome this precarious situation? That's what we're going to look into this. Especially as children are not mature enough to deal or to overcome this by themselves, we need to really take care as the educators of them, as people who are rated as showing the way to them. I have something to tell the children, because now many of them really find it troublesome to go back to the schools. Even my son says, I want to be here. I don't want to go to school. I want to be behind the screen and I can study from here. This is a common factor. There may be a lot of children, because the personality difference has come like this, because they want to hold themselves back to them because of these restricted situations. So I would like to tell the children that a school will never teach you to be happy. And that is not the objective of the school. It teaches to get a job rather. And to overcome this situation, of course, a person needs to be happy. A person needs to be outgoing, all that. But without happiness, you can achieve it. And does happiness worth a bit more than getting a job? This is a question we need to ask ourselves. And if I ask this question to people, they may shrink their faces, say, no, a job is more important to lead our life, to lead us to the future, to get money and live a happy life. I would say no. I would say that happiness is a bit more than this job. If you're happy, you have the mental strength. If you have the mental strength, you will be strong physically. You will be poised. You will Just enlighten your competencies and reach heights in your own fields, and you'll be successful at length for sure. Why are we limiting ourselves to this? I would like to tell the children that when it rains, because that kind of attitude will lead them to success. I would like to tell the children that when it rains, you should look for a rainbow. But when it is dark, you should look for the stars. This kind of flexibility you need to have in your life, in your personality. A famous writer, scientist, literaturist, essayist, Ralph Waldo Emerson is an American literaturist. He says, fear is caused by ignorance. If you are knowledgeable, if you know the facts, you will never have fear. And he quotes an example. He tells to look at a paddy field when it's dark. You're walking through that. You're a stranger there. Then you'll be really fearful seeing something moving here and there. You will see that, oh, that's a snake, that's a dog, that's something. Yes, of course. It happens. Why this happens? Because of ignorance of the place. But if it's a person who is quite acquainted with the place, it will never happen. He will see, oh, I know this place. I know this, what is going to happen. So that fear of the first person is caused by the ignorance of the place. That's the same with COVID or whatever we relate to. Many deaths happen, according to scientists, great personalities, researchers, intellectuals, say that many, around 25%, as I mentioned earlier, happen because of these mental problems, this fear. You know that when one person is stressed, his lungs shrinks. As a doctor is there, I can boldly say that. And this will force a lot of carbon dioxide to go into our lungs. And that, of course, causes suffocation. And what happens when one is infected by COVID? And you know, the main symptom of COVID is this respiratory troubles. So when these two club together, you know, it will be fatal. It will end up in a disaster. And that's what happened with many people all around the world. And for that, to cope with it, you need to be strong. That means you need to strengthen your mind. Of course, when the doctors of cancer disease, they say that the first treatment of cancer starts from yourself. You need to be strong by your mind. You need to think that I can overcome. And that is the first thing a person who is infected by cancer should do. It's the same about COVID. If you are strong by mind, no diseases will enter your body. That is what studies and everyone says. So this is what everyone should be aware of. And you can just think to overcome all this fear and just fill your mind with confidence and go ahead, then this wouldn't happen. So there are a lot of things you need to adjust your mind, yourselves, to cope all these things. The children need to be courageous, and that is what you need to, it's quite paramount at this time that you need to be aware of this. The children need to be courageous to overcome this situation. And you should think of an elephant. There's a nice story about that. You know, the elephant is that big, but it is tied with a chain to a tree or a pole or wherever, and it stands on itself. It doesn't move. It doesn't even try to go out of that chain. Why that happens? Because from childhood, when the elephant is a child, it is trained in such a way, it is tied to a tree or a pole or a pillar, wherever. And it tries to get out of that. It tries to be free, but it can't. And later, maybe after the trials of 6 months or 1 year like that, it understands itself that it can't go. And it is hopeless about that. It doesn't have the strength to move from there. It thinks like that. But when it becomes big, also that thought is there in the mind of the elephant, and it doesn't try because it has been tuned. The software is tuned like that. That us individuals, as humans, you know this difference. So you need to take the potential. You should break your comfort zones. You should think that you have the potential to come out of this and to come out of this and achieve success. So that is what you need to reframe your mind. Don't think like an elephant, but think that you have your power to come out of this. That's very important. And many children commit suicide or just decide or end up in depression because of failures. Mostly when they get less marks, they fail. They become dejected and they end up in some disaster like that. Don't think like that. See, failure, as everyone says, is a stepping stone to success. Small little stairs up the staircase will reach you, will take you to the top. Think like that. When there are 9 dots and somebody tells you to draw 4 lines out of these 9 dots, do it. They tell you that don't lift your hand out of it, but you should lift it and try to complete it. You are successful in drawing 4 lines, lifting your hand, which is not the rule, and you're breaking the rule, but do it. Fail it. Some big failures will take you to big wins. Reframe your mind like that. Shape your mind like that. You will be successful. Think of all that. And don't be dejected anytime. So I would like to tell the teachers, the faculty of IST, that this time the students, especially the inclusive education department, the students come to the school with a lot of troubles, mental problems, and a lot of shortcomings in their personality, and they just are not that confident enough to face the situation. Of course, they might have a lot of help they got from their parents at home. That's the reality. You need to say that. And reality, not our version, that's the reality. So the teachers should think about it. Don't demotivate the students saying about marks or anything like that. Counsel them rather. And counseling is very important. And you, at this point of time, it's quite paramount that counseling should happen in its own way. So be very careful about it. Give him the strength. Give him the motivation. Give him the enlightenment. Bring them back to life, or giving their former personality. That's very important. So counseling is of high importance at the school now. I would like to say that. And to the children, you should cooperate with the teachers, and you should think that you have the power, and you must never be dejected seeing anything of this. See, I will tell you the story of 4 candles. There's a dark room, and why one child entered into that dark room. There were 4 candles, and the child could hear these candles talking something, some whispering from these candles. And the first candle said, I am peace. Nobody is interested in me. Everyone wants to fight. So I don't want to be in this world. I'm going. It blew itself out. The second candle, after that, said, I am faith. Nobody it said, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it lost in between. Okay, the third candle but nobody wants it, and nobody is interested. Everywhere you can see treachery, misfaith, all that. So I am going. It unlit by itself and went away. And the child couldn't bear it, seeing all these candles unlit by itself. It started crying. It was crying like anything. And there was one candle standing there. And that said to him, "Don't worry, my child. I am there. I am hope. If I am there, I can lift all these 3 candles up and bring them back to the world. You don't need to worry about it." That happened. The child took the candle and lit up all those 3 candles: love, faith, and peace. So that is how we should see things. Don't give up hope. You should be hopeful always. That will bring life back to you. And my children, my beloved teachers, SMC members, and boy parents, everyone, be hopeful. We are going to win. And we are at the end of COVID. And all the colors will come back to us. Be patient. Go ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening words. To proceed further, we would like to present a video presentation prepared by our Class 12 Psychology students to mark the importance of the day. Can we have the clipping, please?
Tuesday. Today was a quite busy day. My schedule was packed. I had 3 new clients too. My first session was with a young lady struggling with OCD.
It's difficult because they can't just understand that I'm not doing it on purpose. When I was young, I used to have urges to wash my hands over and over again. My family told that it's just a habit and I could change it, but I would get irritated when I couldn't stop. There were constant arguments over it, and as much as I tried to express, I couldn't just explain it. Even after I was diagnosed, there were times when they couldn't contain their disapproval. In primary school, I used to be called names. They would purposely knock over my arranged book just to agitate me. Now in high school, they don't call me names anymore. They just whisper behind my back, which is even worse. I have friends who are mostly understanding, but sometimes I can see their impatience in their face. I don't go out much either. I get weird stares, but it's okay. I've got used to it. But sometimes their whispers and stares, it makes me feel anxious.
I didn't like going to school because I had trouble reading and writing. The teachers would ask me to read out loud and I would just struggle always. Everything in school was either about reading or writing, and I always lagged behind while my classmates had no trouble at all. A lot of people didn't know about dyslexia, so when my parents noticed, they just branded me as a very careless child. I went through a lot of tutors and language classes, but nothing changed. They were frustrated and I was confused, and I began blaming myself. I was diagnosed with dyslexia in 8th grade. But I still wasn't doing any good at all. I was getting the support for my learning, but most of my classmates didn't like me. Of course, I did have few friends who understood me, but others who knew I was dyslexic were always cold toward me. Every time I tried talking to them, the conversation would just die out. They didn't want to include me in their activities. When the teacher was present, they did speak to me, but only because they were told to include me.
Where we come from, people didn't know much about ASD or anything. So when I was a kid, everyone just thought I was odd. I was like slower than other kids in my local school and I couldn't really connect with them. It was really strange because my family used to see me have trouble learning, see me get upset over small changes and have meltdowns and sensory issues till I was 10, but still never thought that maybe I needed help from outside. Thankfully, though, I was diagnosed after a relative who was studying psychology at the time suggested to get a diagnosis. I studied in my village school after that. There were people around to help me, but my school wasn't a very sensory inclusive school. My friends were few because of my difficulty in social skills, and it didn't help that most parents didn't want me to interact with their child after knowing that I have ASD. After my primary schooling, I got a chance to go to a much better inclusive school in the city. It honestly made me so relieved. People were much more accepting there, and the teachers too. While I studied there, I barely noticed how the standard schooling system was not designed for students like me. I was lucky I got to go to the school, but what about all the other schools with no inclusive options, which is probably most of the schools in this country? Somewhere there's just a student like me struggling because the school system just set them up to failure by not being inclusive.
We want a society that is inclusive of everyone and where everyone who joins feels they have opportunities to grow and succeed.
It is not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize and accept those differences.
Inclusion is not just about physical proximity. It is also about the planning of a child's future.
Mental diseases are like any other diseases. What they require is our patience and support. We are all different, which is great because we are all unique. Without diversity, life is very boring.
Thank you. I'm sure this insightful video collaboration has given us all a magnified view of mental health in an unequal world and made us more empathetic towards the feelings of individuals dealing with them. Let us take a pledge today to strive for our mental well-being and support everyone around us who's dealing with a mental illness. To connect more with the mental health, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for the evening, Dr. Anand Kumar, for his keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to, at the outset, thank the entire team at ISD for extending this invitation for the World Mental Health Day. I'm very thankful to that. I'd also like to wish a very warm good evening to the principal, the vice principal, the head of parent relations subcommittee, the president of the SMC, and other distinguished guests. And I'd also like to say a big hello to all the students and the parents here. I'd like to also thank Ms. Neeta Jose for personally, reaching out to me. We are here to talk about something very, very important. Before I forget, I want to say there was a lovely video done by all the students of grade 12. 20 years back, 30 years back in India, a lot of us wouldn't have known what's OCD or ASD or dyslexia. So the very fact that students are taking up psychology as a major subject at school and probably major that in college, that itself shows that we are progressing in terms of mental health, and mental health is viewed in an equal platform compared to physical health. So all these are very, 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 very good signs. So I'm here today to talk to you about returning back to school, what are the mental health challenges and some possible solutions for that. And also, I would also like to address the theme of the World Mental Health Day for 2021. So if you could give me a few seconds to start the presentation, if that is all right.
Yes.
Sure, sir. Please.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'd just like to ask you once again, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much. All right. So, as we talked about, we have already spoken a lot about this, but according to the WHO, or the World Health Organization, the definition of health, it hasn't changed since 1948, which says that health is not just merely an absence of a disease, but it's a communion between integrity between physical, mental, and social well-being. And as I told you earlier, this definition hasn't changed since the past almost 70 years now. So it's very important that we accept that mental health is as equivalent to our physical health. When it comes to the World Mental Health Day, as most of you would be knowing by now, the World Mental Health Day is celebrated on October 10th of every year, and they have a theme every year. And this year, it's the theme is mental health in an unequal world, and usually the week leading up to October 10th is celebrated as the Mental Health Week. We know through the COVID situation that the world has become increasingly polarized. Not that it wasn't polarized earlier. There were a lot of black and white elements earlier going on in the world. But with the COVID pandemic, it is even more polarized nowadays. There's an increase in the gap between the wealthy and those living in extremely dire situations. There are a lot of inequalities due to many variables, including race, ethnicity, color, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And we know that there's been so many disintegration of human rights happening in many countries right now. Least of all, what we know is happening in Afghanistan right now. And when there are so many inequalities, when people don't treat other people equally, that can have a profound impact on our mental health. So statistics have shown us that between 75 to 95% of people with mental disorders in what we call as low and middle income countries are still unable to access mental health services, mostly because of lack of mental health services in the first place, not enough healthcare providers to provide mental health services, insurance problems, and even going to a mental health service means that they have to spend a lot of money. So these are some reasons why a lot of people do not have access to mental health in especially low and middle income countries. And as you know, there's a lack of investment in mental health, and the mental health investment is completely disproportionate to the overall health budget. According to the National Health Profile of NHP data of 2019, India just spends 1% of its complete GDP on public health. And we spend morsels out of that 1% on mental health. And we spend 3.5% for education out of that GDP. So we spend around 4 to 5% of our entire budget on the two most important things in life, which is health and education, which determines the future of every country. So that is how much there's a divide. I don't think it's just in India. A lot of countries go through these problems. And the other alarming fact is the total number of mental health service providers in India. When I say mental health services, it means the psychiatrists, the psychiatric nurses, the psychiatric social workers, and the psychologists. So the total number of psychiatrists for 1.3 billion people in India is just around 9,000. We have 9,000 people registered psychiatrists in India right now, which is around 0.75 per 100,000 population. There are around 2,000 registered psychiatric nurses, 1,000 to 2,000 registered psychologists, and maybe around 1,000 registered social workers in India right now. So you can immediately note the disproportionate amount of people we have versus the number of people we need. So statistics have told that we need around another 30,000 psychiatrists minimum in India. We need around 40,000 psychologists, social workers, and nurses individually. So this is what statistics have told us. And a lot of times it takes, for people with major psychiatric disorders, sometimes it takes even 15 years before they end up meeting up with a mental service, health service provider. So this data just shows you how much some of the developing countries like India, we are really lacking behind other countries. Compare it to countries like the United States, where There are 45,000 psychiatrists right now for a population of around 30 to 35 crores. So when it comes to the impact, when it comes to children, young adult students, so the stigma and discrimination which they experience, that affects not just their physical health, it affects their mental health. It also mainly affects their educational opportunities because of, once their physical and mental health is not in good state, obviously there might be academic failure, academic deterioration, poor peer relationships, poor socialization, and all that could hurt their educational opportunities, their future earning and job prospects, and also affect their families and loved ones. And that is why this inequality has to be questioned, addressed right now, and it should not be allowed to continue. So how do we address this inequality? Of course, I can't talk for the governments. I can't talk on behalf of the policy holders or the budget deciders. That is not my job. But we know at the school level, at the college level, regular lectures and workshops on mental health, not just for the students, but for the teaching staff, which I'm sure people like the school psychologist and the inclusive education departments might be already doing it on a regular basis. That's very important for students to get exposed to, the meaning of mental health at a very young age. So it's very important that we do invest in a lot of lectures and workshops. There should be more emphasis on personality development, character building, value education, and team bonding. I think that's very important. The success of the team should always be given more importance than the success of the individual. You might fail as a individual, but the team succeeds, you should be happy. You might succeed as an individual, but the team loses, you should feel sad. And that is the kind of moral values which needs to be integrated at the root level. That's very, very important. And psychology as a subject in school is very, very important. And psychology and psychiatry in undergraduate medical courses as well as major education is very, very important. I think it's already happening nowadays, but every school should be given this opportunity to have a major in psychology. That's, as I said, it's imperative that we all do that. And there should be definitive training for the staff members to identify common mental health conditions. I'm glad that there is a lot of psychoeducation done these days to identify common mental health conditions, and a lot of the inclusive education team and the psychologists are doing a lot of good work to help the parents and students understand mental health conditions better. It's also very important that we identify victims who are being discriminated, who are feeling bullied. And a lot of schools around the world have strict anti-bullying measures. And all of our Indian schools here as well are very good advocates of strict measures against bullying. It's also important that we educate the parents of students, as I told you earlier, because it's not just enough if the teachers and the management and the students understand what's going on. It's also important that the parents understand this as well. Now, without further delay, I would like to go to today's topic about returning to learning. As you know, the COVID pandemic, it's turned the world upside down. It is, penetrated every possible barrier and border. It has had a definite impact irrespective of who you are and what socioeconomic status you come from, or what gender you are from. It doesn't matter. Everyone has been equally affected. Times have never been this unpredictable, maybe since the world wars or since the Spanish flu, for example. And the times are unpredictable because we are getting a continuous, we get continuous information, and we are in a very dynamic situation where we have an ever-evolving understanding of the COVID virus and the impact it has on everyone. The recent invention of those vaccines for fighting COVID virus and social distancing has saved millions of lives, and it has even given us now the luxury to return to some form of normalcy. And schools are reopening after 18 months almost now. And as today's topic suggests, comes with it a host of challenges. Are you able to hear me so far? Can anyone acknowledge that?
Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Yes, very good.
Thank you. So when it comes to mental health challenges, let's go through what are the challenges and then we will talk about possible solutions. Now you have to understand the children. I'm addressing everyone here. I'm making sure that I address the parents, the management, the students. So it's for everyone here. So you have to understand a lot of students have experienced loss and bereavement. And they would have had relatives or friends or heard someone who had died during the pandemic. A lot of them you would have even been aware of a relative of a friend being seriously unwell and hospitalized. A lot of them themselves would have had COVID themselves, the students. And they also have to face other situations like the parents who have either been demoted or even lost their jobs, and because of which they had to change their houses, for example, or change their school. A lot of these kids also have had a long-term isolation from important figures in their lives, like their grandparents. Regardless of whether they faced the COVID situation or they knew a person who was unwell or they lost anyone due to the COVID pandemic, regardless of the type of the loss, many of them would be experiencing various stages of what we call as grief, right? So it's very important for us as parents and the educators to understand what's grief. Everyone would already be knowing it. A natural grief can have various stages. The natural way in which a person grieves is in the initial phase, that's the shock phase, where they deny that whatever has happened has not happened. And then they even reciprocate their grief with anger and disbelief that this has happened to them. They even are angry against God for putting them in this situation. And then they even go to a level of bargaining of why has this happened to them. There are so many people who do so much of wrong and sins, but why is this happening to them? And that stage is called the bargaining. And then they can go into a stage of depression, where they might feel low all the time. They might lose interest in things. They are not able to focus as well as before. And finally, once they cope up with all this, then they enter a stage of acceptance. This is the way natural grief happens. It is not necessity that they should go through every stage like this. They can go through these stages in any order or in any frequency or quantification of time. Right? What the parents and educators have to be more careful about is how to recognize abnormal grief. We were talking about natural grief, but how do we recognize abnormal grief? When grief goes beyond normal grieving and it goes to a level where the child or the student's quality of life is affected, then you should always suspect abnormal grief. Kids can have something as simple as difficulty concentrating or going down in terms of their academics, having sleeping problems, having nightmares, bad dreams, flashbacks, kids becoming overtly clingy to the parents, which they have never done before, always feeling that they are abandoned, feeling very anxious. Kids who regress back to younger stages of their development, and kids who have changes in the way they behave or the way in which they adapt to playing and socialization, and kids who feel extremely guilty. Some of these are the common signs in which you have to sometimes suspect abnormal type of grief. So it's very important that the educators of the school work with the school psychologists, the inclusive education department and the social workers to identify this and intervene whenever required. Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
Then the kids also have these challenges at home. Too much of family time is always not positive, isn't it? It's not just always positive. When there are too many people all the time, there can be sparks, there can be differences in opinion. And a lot of families have faced conflict during this COVID times, during the lockdowns, because of differences in opinions, differences in personality. So there are these family conflicts which kids have to endure sometimes. There are financial concerns at home, loss of employment for parents, all right, loss of a job, demotion. Also, there are a lot of kids whose parents are key workers, and they know that their parents, they go every day. The kids know that at any point of time, their parents can, test as COVID positive. And some parents even are COVID positive, they quarantine themselves, they become sick, but then they have to get back to work because they are key workers. And that is a lot of trauma for a young child to go through. And also, sometimes I've seen a lot of kids who have to care for their own family members because both the family members developed the COVID. And they are bedridden. Sometimes kids, young kids, 13, 14-year-old kids have to cook sometimes for their parents, look after their day-to-day work and chores. So these are some challenges kids had to go through during the pandemic. Also, it's about the uncertainty. School always used to be a very constant, stable presence in every student's life, isn't it? But nowadays, even the school sometimes might not be the most safest, and it's not a predictable location anymore, because right now the schools are reopening. Maybe in the rare occurrence that the cases goes up, the school might close down again. So these kind of instability and unstable presence in a previous location, which used to create some form of stability to the students, might also be very scary for them. And that is something which we need to address as teachers and educators. And we have to keep them informed in a very realistic and in a very kind manner. That's very important for them to understand about that. So when the kids deal with the COVID pandemic, a lot of them have even lost confidence in the adults in their lives, because the kids are the ones who are the least affected in terms of the COVID pandemic, physically at least. The least number of deaths and the least amount of morbidity happened in the kids' age group. But still, they were the ones who lost the most. They were the ones who were not allowed to go in public. They were the ones who were at home 24 hours a day. And that's when sometimes kids tend to lose confidence in adults. These are the people who were supposed to look after us and save us. And these are the people who let us down because of the COVID pandemic. So there's a lack of confidence among young people, students, which we need to address. And there are these random temperature checks, the regular checkups, the regular declaration forms. All these could cause the pupils to feel anxious and distracted, even though we know that most of the kids above the age of 12 are vaccinated now, and we know that the adults associated with all the children are vaccinated. So there's a very, very, very less chance of kids contracting the virus. But still, the regular testing, the temperature checkups, all this could make the children feel anxious and distracted. The other thing is the transition. We have had 18 months of virtual school. So children who are moving from primary school to the secondary school, meaning from the 5th to 6th standard, kids who are moving from the 10th to 11th standard, kids who are moving from the 12th standard to college or the university, all of them are the ones who are suffering the most, because a lot of their things which the educational challenges which they need to address, all the socialization which they missed, suddenly they have to come from this virtual background and then come and deal with regular school. So these are the children who are the most at risk now. So the kids moving from primary to secondary school, the kids moving into exam years, and the ones who are preparing to leave school. All of these are the ones who have to ventilate a lot to the teachers as well as the educators. Also, when you come back to school after a long break, a lot of students might have noticed people whom they were close friends before may not be the same way now. Friendships may have become more strained or deteriorated. Children and young people may even feel apprehensive because they are returning to physical school, and connecting with their peers physically instead of virtually might sound a little strange and bizarre to them. And also bullying and a lot of teasing might go on because around the topic of the contagion and the COVID pandemic. So that's very important for teachers and educators to identify, and it's important for students who are being bullied or teased to open up to teachers and educators. It's very important for them to do that. Also, a lot of young kids, during the 18 months, though a lot of them do want to come back to school, there is a small proportion of students who are also very anxious, introverted, kids with previous low self-esteem, kids who have had social anxiety, kids who were previously bullied, have actually found the virtual medium to be more stable and accommodating and more of a safe haven, more than the physical school. And these are the kids who would find it the most difficult to come back to physical school. And that's why it's very important for the parents and the teachers and the educators to help them with a very slow transition between virtual and physical school. And it's important for the parents to emphasize nothing beats physical school, and it's always the best. And that is the best way to learn. And, it's very important for them to socialize. So this is very important for us to understand that allowing children who feel comfortable in a virtual environment, it's not a good idea to keep them continuously in a virtual environment. Instead, there should be a slow, gradual transition back to physical school. Although now it's back to regular scheduling, as you know, the kids were having a fun time most of the time at home because they had very erratic schedules. You know that, everyone knows that, most of our kids do that. They'd get up at the last possible moment, brush their teeth, wouldn't have breakfast, and they would sit for the classes. Some of them would, switch off their, video cameras because they don't want to be noticed or observed. Sometimes they have naps in between the classes. So all these are regular things the kids have been doing. Not all of them, some of them have been doing during the virtual school, but now they have to come back and they have to focus over a period of 6 to 8 periods, each period lasting 40 to 15 minutes. So from kids having more freedom and no say about what they exactly have to do at home, to a more monotonous and a regular lifestyle that might cause some problems for some of them. A lot of them, as you noticed in the virtual period, they had this habit of going to sleep very late, getting up late. A lot of them even had gone to the level of multiplayer gaming, online gaming. They would sleep very late night. On weekends, they would play the whole night, sleep at 3 a.m. in the morning and get up at 11 in the morning. So this is what's been going on. So making these kids coming back to school, that's going to be definitely a difficult proposition. And this is what parents and educators have to be well informed about. So all this would cause definitely a reduction in their focus and attention spans. So we have to make sure that we give some space to them when it comes to that. And we definitely have to put in more effort to make sure that they are switched on all the time in terms of their focus and attention. And I will be talking about that in the management. So the general tips to school for the students returning back to school is try to get back into a routine as quickly as possible. That's very, very important. And make sure that you have enough breaks as much as required, but make sure you get back into a routine. Have a very strict routine on weekdays. Have a more relaxed routine on weekends. That's very, very important for you as a student. If you have any concerns or any doubts and questions, do speak to your teacher or your counselor. That's very, very important. Stay flexible. So because these are very unpredictable times. So in terms of your ideology, try to be as flexible as possible, right? There might be very short notices to some announcements in terms of examinations, in terms of holidays, in terms of announcements, in terms of the health sector. So there might be so many things which might happen. So, think of only the current day, think of what's happening today. Don't look too much into the future. Take it day by day, and that will help you to stay flexible so that even if some bad news does hit you in the future, you would be more in tune to accept it. So stay flexible. Also, it's very important for you to connect with friends, re-establish all those relationships. You're transitioning from virtual medium to a physical medium. Things would not be the same. So it's very important for you to connect with friends, open up with them, have a lot of leisurely activities, have a lot of extracurricular activities to begin with, so that this would be a more steady and a healthy way of transitioning back. Also, continue to practice the good hygiene. I know it's difficult to do it because you have been vaccinated, your parents mostly have been vaccinated, but it's very important that still you could pass on the virus to other people who are not younger students who are not vaccinated. So it's very important that we do continue to social distance, wear our masks. I'm sure your management and the educators would be making sure this happens, but it's important to take it as an individual challenge and to continue to practice good hygiene. So how do we all help? How do the parents and the educators and the mental health services, how do we help? It's very important that to understand that different students within the same class would have had very different experiences of the pandemic. And each one has their own temperament. Each of them have their own emerging personality, characteristics. They have their varying levels of coping skills. And they have different ways of dealing with these experiences. And they also have varying levels of resilience. So it's very important that we have an open mind of what pupils or students might go through and how they will be coping with it and what kind of support would they need. That's very important for us to understand. So also make sure that we also understand some warning signs, and we should never take warning signs from the students lightly. So if you do notice that there's a significant change in their mood, and they are continuously not interested in things, not able to focus, they are constantly worried or apprehensive, and they have reduced their socialization, they are more tearful, more emotional and sensitive, that should be taken as a warning sign. If there's a significant change in weight, either an increase in weight or decrease in weight, their eating habits, that also should be taken into consideration. If they feel fatigued easily and becoming tired, and they clearly look tired and they look sleep deprived, all this could be a cause of concern. Anger outbursts which seem out of character to what these students were earlier should be immediately acknowledged and discussed with. Any secretive behavior from the students, like avoiding going out during the PE lessons, for example, or staying long hours in the restrooms in the schools, or avoiding their meals, all these should be indicative of some warning signs. And as the head of the parent relations subcommittee talked about the increase in self-harming and suicide during the pandemic, it's very important that we look out for any abnormal scratches or cutting or anything which you see, which you feel is a warning sign. It's important that we do not take these signs very lightly. So although we as educators and the school management have to accept that learning has to be adaptive, it cannot be concrete and inflexible. Students, we have to understand that the students of different sections of different classes may not be able to learn at the same pace as they have done before, and they have a very poor concentration span nowadays because of the virtual media, and they have a disrupted ability to focus. So maybe it's very important that we start off with a very slow and gradual learning, and then as the students become more and more acclimatized, then we go on to more the previous ways of learning. Also, it's important for teachers and educators to acknowledge what's happened while dwelling on the situation related to the COVID pandemic. We have to understand the scale of what we went through, what we are going through, what we might go through in the future as well. And it's very important the kids are kept in tune in a very sensitive and a clearly educated manner about new announcements or restrictions which are being made as and when the situation changes over time. We are almost there, we are almost at the end, but that doesn't mean that we can take it lightly. So it's very important that we do understand these restrictions. Also, it's very important that, there's as I told you earlier, that each kid's individual worries are addressed. I would be coming to that as well. Very important, more than ever, to allow these children to ventilate. It also becomes that much more of a responsibility from our side to balance more academic lessons with creative and vocational ones as well. Especially for the lower and the middle classes, extended circle time check-ins as a whole class, that can be a very helpful way for them to share their experiences, re-establish their skills, communication skills like listening to others, allowing them to talk in turns, and also to improve their concentration. So even it's not necessary that always the psychologist or the social worker has to check in with the pupils. Even the teachers can check in. There are some students who have their favorite teachers or the favorite teachers or the educators whom they like to go back to. So those educators can plan a one-on-one schedule with some students who want to open up with you. You can even make a regular schedule with students who would like to speak to you. So that's very important, allowing them to ventilate. Also, it's very important that we allow the students to look at everything in a very positive and optimistic way. So there are so many bad things which happened during the pandemic. A lot of things, a lot of drama, a lot of negativity. But there are some very few positive and optimistic things which has happened again. If you would remember, all of you would remember these beautiful pictures posted across social media, National Geographic, where you see this polluted grey waters of Venice, the canals, the grey canals becoming, blue, dolphins coming from the ocean right into these canals. And you see overall the energy usage around the world had reduced. The air pollution, the air quality has improved. So there is good things which has happened due to the pandemic as well. And now people have also identified that it's very important that we adopt a philosophy like a Pura Vida, where we live every day to the fullest. And we do not dwell into everything into the future. Not everything is about our future goals. Not everything is about accumulating wealth or security all the time. It's very important that we do not, lose track of the present by committing too much into the future. So that is all some good things which has also happened during the pandemic. It's also important for the teachers and educators to involve all the pupils, allow them to focus on their strengths, and simple things like puzzle hunts, team bonding exercises, creating a scavenger hunts, treasure hunts, all of them to compete in teams. All these could be useful ways of reaching out to these kids. Also, you could allow all of them to turn to the arts, because even in the worst possible situation, that negative emotions sometimes can bring out the artist in us, or the poet in us, or the musician in us. Some of the best pieces of art, visual art, music, poems were created during negative experiences in life. So sometimes the creative arts can really help us to express our feeling that sometimes we struggle to put into words, and it can make us feel more whole and less lonely in these kind of difficult situations. Something like a simple thing like a class, an art mural, which can be done by the whole class or the school. These little things can help us to build connections and allow us to feel that, we are part of the whole. This is something all of us endured. We have all of us have struggled. All of us have, lost a lot. But now we are going back to normalcy, and there's a lot still to gain, and humanity is still very much alive. And that is the message which has to reach the young kids. So turning to the arts is another way of, helping them out. Also, nothing more is important than being more mindful. So we could even start off the class by, every class could be started with a small breathing exercise, a relaxation exercise, a small quotation, a funny joke from the teacher or the educator, just to start off the class. I know that would take a couple of minutes of your time. You could even allow the kids to interact with each other at the start of the class, just to get that sense of bonding. And so that the kids, when you start off with something positive and optimistic, that would keep them in high spirits and allow them to better focus for the next 30 to 40 minutes. And also, occasionally once in a week basis, you could allow the class to think of a list of things they can do if they're feeling worried. You could give a timeout system more flexibly. That's also could really help. You could leave out a glass jar or a worry jar right outside the classroom corridor or a post box outside your office, where the pupils can, anonymously or not even anonymously put in some things which worries them a lot, or they really want your help on, or that can be a way of letting you know what's bothering them right now. So all these are some things which teachers, educators and the management can do it. At the end, I also say it's very as important as parents and educators and teachers to look after your own mental health. That's very important, because you would be dealing with kids now, on a physical basis. You would have kids of your own. You would have grown-up kids in different parts of the world now. So it's very important for you to, reach out, talk about your feelings, ventilate about your feelings to other people, to the psychologist, to your own team. That's very important as well. I'd like to end my presentation by saying that children are very, very resilient. It's incredible to know how resilient they are. And all these mental health challenges which I talked about will happen to probably 10 to 20% of the group of kids who are coming back into physical school. There is the other thing which is also happening. There are so many kids who are so earnest and eager to come back to physical school. They are so much excited and optimistic of getting back to school. And they have even become more positive about school than how they started off just before the pandemic happened. So the kids are incredibly resilient. They are more resilient than we give them scope for. So do understand that. And you have to understand, but for a minority of the people, there are transitional problems when it comes to coming out from a virtual background to a physical school. So it's very important that the educators, teachers, management do a lot of planning and preparation. And that will be a key aspect to produce solutions to these challenges. If there ever was a holistic approach to education, this is the time, and this is the era. And I'm sure these difficult times would have opened up a lot of good things in humanity. And this would help the educators and the management and the parents to look at things in a more holistic way. And I'm sure the future of all our lovely young children is bright. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you for the time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for illuminating us with in-depth knowledge about mental health and for the prep talk about coming back to school. Now, I would like to invite Mrs. Nagarthi T.S. for proposing a vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
A warm and cherished evening to all. Thank you is such a prayer that cannot be seen or touched. It must be felt by heart. So, while thanking the Almighty for His choicest blessings, I deem it my privilege to propose the vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of all those who were part of this occasion today. Our chief guest, Mr. Vinod Kumar, Head Parents Relations Subcommittee and Head HSC Subcommittee. Our first gratitude is due to you, sir, for the excellent inaugural address and for sparing your valuable time and gracing this occasion to motivate all of us. We definitely assure you that we will be the fourth candle for all of our students. Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Anand Kumar's session was really informative. I'm pretty sure the precious knowledge that Dr. Anand Kumar gave us will definitely help us shape our mental health to break up the challenges of our students and prepare ourselves to begin school positively. On behalf of Indian School Darsit and the entire fraternity of the Institute, my sincere thanks to Dr. Anand Kumar for taking out time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with his wonderful ideas. Thank you so much, Doctor. I take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks to Mr. Sebastian Chungat, President, School Management Committee, Mrs. Blessy Diana Shijin, Vice President, School Management Committee, Mr. Ajit Vasudevan, Convener, School Management Committee, Head Academic Subcommittee and Head ICT Subcommittee, Dr. Kurian Abraham, Treasurer, School Management Committee and Head Finance and Planning and Sports Subcommittee, Mrs. Shama Shamsuddin, Head Inclusive Education Subcommittee and Head Co-Curricular and Cultural Subcommittee, and all other esteemed members of the School Management Committee for all the guidance and encouragement extended to us, which has immensely enhanced the importance of this occasion. I would place on record our hearty thanks to our respected principal, Mr. Amar Srivastava, Vice Principal Senior Section, Mr. Alexander G. Varghese, Vice Principal Primary Section, Mrs. Geeta Chauhan, Assistant Vice Principal, Supervisors, Coordinators, HODs, teachers, parents, and students for your exemplary guidance and unstinted support for today's event. I owe a special gratitude to our budding rock stars of Class 12 who entertained us with their impressive performances. We value you and every moment that you stay in this temple of learning. I would like to bring my thanks to a close by borrowing this quote. Mental health starts with you. If you take care of your mind, you take care of the world. So invest in your mental health and claim the power back. Once again, I thank everyone wholeheartedly for making this event a great one. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, everyone.